Welcome back to Zion's Redemption Radio Network. Today we're going to be reading part 1 of chapter 8 of the Church and the Priesthood. The title of the chapter is 20 Priesthood Laws and Evidences. We'll be reading starting on page 109. And this actual chapter goes to page 177, so that is 66 pages. That's a lot. It's going to take me quite a bit to get through this chapter, I think. But it's okay. I got my little nap in that was 4 hours long, and that's why the last program was 4 hours long, because I fell asleep. And the reader program just kept on reading to the end and then going back to the beginning and starting over again. Oh man, I was tired, and I still am tired, but it's 10 p.m. now, and I still have a couple of episodes to make, just to make sure that I have at least 1 or 2 days when I get off of work. So I'm trying to make episodes for the 4 days that I work, and 1 to 2 days after I work, so at least 6 episodes. But I want to cover 7 days, because I'm trying to put out 1 podcast a day, every day of the week. That's my new goal, and I don't know how long I'll be able to keep up for doing this. But anyway, let's get into the reading right after we dedicate the program, and then I'll read as long as I can, and we'll see where we get from there. O God, the eternal Father, we come before thee in the name of thy Son, Jesus Christ. We ask thee, Father, to forgive us of our sins and our transgressions, that we might have thy Spirit to be with us, that we might be led in thy ways, receive inspiration, revelation, and confirmation of the Spirit as we study these details out as part of the restoration, to try to understand the truth of these matters. We love thee, Father, and we ask for thy blessings to be upon us. And we say these things and ask for thy blessings in the name of thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen. 20 Priesthood Laws and Evidences, Chapter 8 of the Church and the Priesthood, starting on page 109, but this chapter goes to page 177. Of course, like I said, it's too much. I won't be able to get through that. On my reader program alone, if I just had the reader program read it, it would be 2 hours long. So, ordinance instituted in the heavens before the foundation of the earth, in the priesthood for the salvation of men, are not to be altered or changed. All must be saved on the same principles. That's Joseph Smith, Teachings of the Prophet Joseph Smith, page 308. Why was it that the Lord did not restore the gospel and the priesthood to one of the many churches already in existence? The answer is probably because he knew the ministers and their congregations would not accept them. See, like, people get stuck in their ways, and then they won't accept anything else. The LDS Church is the same with that, and that's the reason why Isaiah and others see a remnant. It's a small group of people who live God's laws, and they're led by a servant called some people call him the Davidic servant. Some people call him the Indian prophet. There's different names, the one mighty and strong. But like these people that God has following this individual, they're not going to, hopefully they're not going to bring their customs, because the LDS Church is saturated with Gentile customs that are not part of the restored gospel. They're not part of the church. There's perverted doctrines, because over time these things leach into the church, and then it starts to get hardened in its ways. That's why you don't see Pentecostal type LDS congregations, because in the beginning, it's like pouring concrete. Like, it's moldable and wet, and you can you can do things with it. But once it gets hard, there ain't no changing it. There is no changing it. And sometimes the mold gets a little bit weird. So, and that would be the Gentiles who stomped all over wet concrete. Anyway, this is evidenced by the fact that after Joseph Smith established the priesthood with its doctrines and ordinances, other church combined to oppose him and the restored gospel. However, preserving and maintaining these priesthood laws and ordinances have proved to be just as difficult as restoring them. When the U.S. Constitution was originally adopted, a lady asked Benjamin Franklin what they had given to the people. He responded, "If a republic, if you can keep it." Undoubtedly, the prophet Joseph Smith felt the same. He had given the saints the fullness of the gospel and the authority of the priesthood, but could they keep it? A church should be subordinate to the priesthood authority, but unfortunately, churches have a tendency to expect the priesthood to function only within their framework. The important question is, can men within the church make significant changes in priesthood laws and ordinances and still possess the priesthood? Well, the answer is no, as we've already covered. Joseph Smith talked about that. All right, let's see. This chapter contains criteria on 20 different doctrines and principles that will show their close connection to the priesthood as compared to the LDS Church. The information provided on these important gospel subjects will show that priesthood laws remain the same whether or not the LDS Church changes or rejects them. Okay, topic 1, the LDS Church and appendage to the priesthood. Number 2, common consent. Number 3, missionary work. Number 4, the garment of the priesthood. Number 5, gifts and powers of the priesthood. Number 6, the ordinances of the priesthood. Number 7, rebaptism. Number 8, conferring and ordaining to the priesthood. Number 9, celestial plural marriage. Number 10, Babylon versus Zion. Number 11, united we stand, divided we fall. Number 12, the persecuted and the persecutors. Number 13, deceptions and delusions. Number 14, race restrictions. Number 15, use or loss of keys of the priesthood. Number 16, the LDS Church and the kingdom of God. Two different things. Number 17, kings and queens. Number 18, the first and second comforters. Number 19, the redemption of Zion. And number 20, the only true God. We're on page 111 at 2%. Yeah, this is a long chapter. All right, number 1, the LDS Church, an appendage of the priesthood. Creationists and evolutionists continue to argue about which came first, the chicken or the egg, but historians do not have that same problem regarding the church and the priesthood. It is an established historical fact that the priesthood existed before the church and was actually the power and authority that created the church rather than the church creating the priesthood. We could compare it to the church as an automobile and the priesthood as the builder of the automobile. That which is created is not greater than the creator. Further, the Lord explained, quote, "The offices and elders and bishop are necessary appendages belonging unto the high priesthood." Doctrine and Covenants, section 84, verse 29. All other authorities or offices in the church are appendages to this priesthood, referring to the Melchizedek priesthood. Doctrine and Covenants, section 107, verse 5. Professor Sidney B. Sperry described these appendages as attachments or adjuncts. Doctrine and Covenants Compendium, page 557, which indicates that the church is merely an attachment to the priesthood. Daniel Webster defined appendage as any subordinate or external organ or part such as a branch of a tree or the tail of a dog. Webster's New World Dictionary. Thus, all church offices, and auxiliaries are merely appendages to or attachments to the priesthood because the priesthood is the greater power. Charles Rich added that pertaining to sealings and endowments, we understand that the priesthood is greater than the temple. Journal of Discourses, Volume 19, page 163. Thus it follows that since the church is created by the priesthood, it too is an appendage of the priesthood. We live in a day when the LDS church membership is considered to be more important and greater than the priesthood. Men worry more about the church membership than they do about priesthood laws and principles, which should be their utmost priority. Why would men compromise and make concessions which jeopardize their priesthood? Simply because they place the church position above the priesthood authority and erroneously think that the priesthood is an appendage to the church. And I just, so the church put out this little meme with where the church numbers were at in 1924, because that's when Russell M. Nelson was born, and he recently had his 100th birthday, and showing the increase in the numbers. And I took the membership of the church and divided it by the wards and branches, and came out to something like 549 or something, maybe it was 539 people per ward and branch, which is ridiculous. Like, wards don't have that many people in them, not that many active people, and branches definitely don't. Like, I've been in branches where there were 15 members of the church there, So I was just showing the disparity between the numbers and how the majority of those who the church claims are LDS are not active, they're inactive. The church also claims membership on people that they don't know where their records are till 110 years old, and then they drop them off. So the membership numbers of the church are greatly skewed. Because why would they do this? Well, there's lots of reasons why people give me why they do this, but I believe that the reason is because they want to have popularity in the eyes of the world, and they believe numbers show truth, which is weird because the Catholic Church has a lot more members than the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and that doesn't prove that they're true, but it's all about popularity with the world. Excuse me. My friend was talking about, I've known him for, probably 10 or 11 years now. And he was talking about this individual that he has in his days seen this guy get excommunicated like 3 or 4 times for adultery, and then he always comes back into the church, and he currently has a temple recommend. Well, in the church, the bylaws of the church given by God himself in the Doctrine and Covenants say that you cannot welcome an adulterer back into the church, but this guy keeps coming back and coming back and coming back, and I think what my friend has a problem with this is because I think one of his wives went off with him. I can't remember. I might be wrong about that, but it doesn't matter. Like, if you've confessed to adultery and you've been excommunicated, it's lights out for you. You don't get to come back. You get to keep your reward. But anyway, the church doesn't follow the rules that has been laid out for it. Like, I was excommunicated for apostasy because I have the temerity to stand up to what God has shown me. Like the fact that I have seen him face to face. Well, a stake president didn't like that when he heard about it. And so he excommunicates me because only the president of the church can ever have that kind of experience. Like, L. Tom Perry was sent by Gordon B. Hinckley to interview me about those things. and they believed me. But like this rogue stake president doesn't care what anybody else says. He's just going to do what he does. And I was excommunicated without a trial. They didn't need me there. They didn't want me there. So, but that's against what God has laid out as far as the church, how things are supposed to be done. But they don't care, because Babylonian businessmen have hijacked your church. False administrators, as God has said to me in a revelation that I have written down, have hijacked your church. Continuing on, President J. Reuben Clark made a very important clarification on this subject when he said, "The priesthood is essential to the church, but the church is not essential to the priesthood." Improvement Era, Volume 39, page 134. He infers that the church cannot exist without the priesthood, but the priesthood, being greater of the two, can exist without the church. And I would say the church could exist without the priesthood, because the priesthood is not in other churches and they exist. I think I know what he means. Like, the church cannot be a living church if it doesn't have the priesthood. It could be a dead church, But if the church is in apostasy so much that it has died spiritually, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, I've felt the Spirit in lots of different churches. It didn't mean they have the priesthood. It just meant that truth was being told in them. But just because you feel the Spirit in a church doesn't mean it's a living church. A living church has living revelation, guidance by actual priesthood leaders that are prophets, seers, and revelators, and all the such. If you don't have that active process of revelation to the church, you don't have a living church. And it's been over 100 years since the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints has had an active, living revelation. In fact, 1890 was the last one Wilford Woodruff claimed to have a thus saith the Lord revelation, but I think it was a dark revelation. I don't believe him. But there were other revelations before that, like the 1886 and the 1882 revelations. But let's see, how long's that been? 240 years, or what was it? No, 140 years? Yeah, something like that. 140 something years, 142 years since the church had a thus saith the Lord revelation. And then those ones, what happened to them? The church tried to cover them up and say that they don't exist. So guess what? They don't get any more. All right. According to the prophet Joseph Smith, now the great and grand secret of the whole matter, and the summum bonum of the whole project is lying before us, consists of obtaining the powers of the holy priesthood. Doctrine and Covenants, section 128, verse 11. And that's the thing. God wanted to give them the fullness of the priesthood in the Nauvoo temple. And in order for that to happen, the Father himself had to come down to a place that was prepared for him to physically give it to us. In order for that to happen, you had to have the Melchizedek priesthood to go into his presence, because that's how you do that. You don't come in the physical presence of the Father unless you have the Melchizedek priesthood, which they still had in Nauvoo, regardless of what some fools have said. Okay? Now, if they would have done what they were supposed to do and they finished that temple, the Father would have come down to give them the fullness of the priesthood, which was obtaining the powers or the full endowment of God's priesthood. Not a play, it was an endowment of power. That was what was supposed to happen in Nauvoo if they were obedient. But they were told that if they were not obedient, they would be rejected as a church with their dead. Okay? Continuing on with the reading. And from Heber C. Kimball, we receive the priesthood and power and authority if we make a bad use of that priesthood, do you not see that the day will come when God will reckon with us and he will take it from us and give it to those who will make better use of it? Journal of Discourses, Volume 6, page 125. So they knew that God could reject them, and that if that rejection happened, which it did, it happened long before this statement, that God could give it to another people. But then again, I've heard people say, "Well, he said he said he would never take it off the earth." Yeah, he did say that. So how would that happen, where he gives it to another people? Well, the priesthood would be given to an individual through the regular means of laying on of hands from a physical mortal being to another physical mortal being. And then God would give the fullness of the priesthood to that individual that he chose. And then the keys of the priesthood, the church and the kingdom, and that person would fulfill Daniel chapter 12, wherein the man clothed in linen raises his arms to the air after the manner of the Melchizedek priesthood and severs the power, or scatters the power of all the holy priesthood. It's in Daniel chapter 12. It happens in the last days. It already happened. I was given the priesthood by a man by the name of Jack Christensen, who was born in 1900. I received it from him when he was 97 years old, before my mission. And then I was given that priesthood, and then I went on, and eventually in 2003, so 5 years later, God took me up to a place called Mount Vashel, where I physically climbed a mountain, Mount Vashel, and at the top of the mountain there was a temple. I went into that temple and I saw the Father face to face in that temple. When I came into his glory, I fell on my face. He told me to get up, or arise. I stood up. He opened his arms to me, and I embraced him in the flesh, and he embraced me in the flesh. My Father in heaven embraced his Son, myself, in the flesh. He told me to kneel down before him, and he placed his hands on my head and gave me the power and the authority that he wanted me to have to give this priesthood to another people, which I have done. He also sealed me up unto eternal life, thus making himself adopted to me, or like, it's part of the law of adoption. So like Joseph Smith was sealed up through his calling and election to Jesus Christ, and then Jesus Christ is sealed up to the Father. And there's a priesthood line of adoption. So people were being sealed to Joseph Smith because he was sealed to Jesus Christ, and through that to the Father. That, and then beyond the Father to the Elohim, and eventually to God, the Eternal Father. Well, I was sealed directly up under the hands of the Father to himself. So when it talks about one man on the earth, Joseph Smith was the man on the earth. I'm now the man on the earth. I've been given the fullness of the priesthood and the keys, and according to Daniel chapter 12, which I did not understand at the time that God told me to use the authority and the power that I was given to sever the ordinances of all the holy people. That was confusing to me, but I did it. And then later on, my aunt found that revelation, that scripture that talks about the man clothed in linen in the last days doing that very thing. So she was all excited. She calls me up and says, "You fulfilled prophecy." And I'm like, "What? What are you talking about?" Anyway, it turns out actually I'm fulfilling many prophecies, which is strange for me. Like, wow. Anyway, but it doesn't matter. It does matter. Whether I accept it or not is between you and God, but it is a thing. Anyway, but God's already given the priesthood away to another people. Part of the whole scattering the power of the holy people in the last days is that all of your ordinances have been severed. Your baptisms, your blessings, your priesthood ordinations, your sealings, your marriages, they're all null and void in the eyes of God. All of them. And I'm not just getting that by my own logic. It says it in the revelations that God has given me. And hereby one remains that you must come to. That's what it says in those revelations. But continuing on, that includes your blessings, your priesthood, your baptisms, all of it. It's all been wiped out. It's basically God's using this as a hard reset to set the house of God in order, because he cannot get those other ones to change, to set themselves in order, because he allows them to have free agency, and they're going to do what Gentiles do. And there's a lot of good in those churches. There's a lot of good, and there's a lot of truth in those churches. But they have the power and the authority to do what they're going to do, and they're not going to accept me, God's witness, as part of that. And so God is not going to accept them. So I asked God, why do you want me to do this? He said, because if they will not accept you as my witness, I will not accept them. Plain and simple, down to the brass tacks, the flat truth. He gave me the authority that he gave me so that I could set the house of God in order. And I do that first by teaching, which is what we're doing right now. Anyway, we're on page 113 at 5 whopping %. Oh, this chapter is huge. Thus, when there is a discrepancy or conflict between the laws of the church and the laws of the priesthood, it is a much wiser choice to follow the priesthood rather than one of its appendages. Number 2, common consent. According to revelations from God, the LDS Church is to be governed and controlled by the vote of its members. Officers are to be voted upon before they take office. See, yeah, and that's the truth. But when President Nelson became the president of the church, they set him apart as the leader of the church before General Conference, and that is that's not supposed to be done that way. But they don't care. They don't care. They're going to do things the way they want to do things, because they're the ones in charge. You think Jesus is in charge of the church? You better think again. The leaders are in charge of the church. Jesus has no say in the matter. They have taken away the church from Jesus. They do not go to him to find out what his will is, and he doesn't talk to them, because when he told them what his will was, they ignored him and they rejected it and they lied about it. And do you think he's going to come back? And he's suffered with them a long time, but he's done. Okay, that's why Doctrine and Covenants, section 85, Jesus foresaw this, and he said to Joseph Smith that he would have to send one mighty and strong to set the house of God in order. Doctrine and Covenants, section 85. Go read it for yourself. While that man who's called and appointed is destroyed by the vivid shaft of lightning. Well, who's the one that's called? Well, he's the leader of your church. He tries to set it in order in his own image, and eventually he's destroyed for that. All right. I've heard that Heber J. Grant was killed by being struck by lightning, but I don't know if that's true or not. But because God can take somebody out whenever he wants, right? That's why I know this is a tangent, but I've always wondered, why in the world does God want us to do his bidding? Like Nephi had to kill Laban. Why couldn't God just make him have a heart attack or something? See, there's things I don't understand. I just don't get some things. Even though I've been given all this knowledge and all this whatever, I still question some things. But anyway, continuing on. In April 1830, the Lord clearly explained, quote, "No person is to be ordained to any office in this church where there is a regularly organized branch of the same without the vote of that church." Well, that's interesting. Okay, Doctrine and Covenants, section 20, verse 65. And 3 months later, the Lord further stated that all things must receive the vote of the people, which would include doctrines, revelations, etc. Yeah, and like they say that the 1882 and the 1886 and the other dark revelations that I don't accept at all, they say, well, they're not in the church archives. Like, we didn't accept those. Well, you never even presented them to the people so that they could vote on it. You hid them. Which is why you're in further condemnation than, whatever. Anyway, the church hides these things. They always have hidden these things. And all things shall be done by common consent in the church by much prayer and faith. For all things you shall receive by faith. Doctrine and Covenants, section 26, verse 2. See also Doctrine and Covenants 28, verse 13. As an example of this procedure, let's review the history of the Articles of Faith. In March of 1842, Joseph Smith responded to a letter written to him by John Wentworth, the editor and owner of the Chicago Democrat. Wentworth wanted to know a brief history and the beliefs of the Mormons. Included in Joseph Smith's lengthy response were what has become known as the Articles of Faith, which has become the most published document of beliefs of the Mormons. Millions of copies of these articles have been published in a variety of formats. However, it wasn't until General Conference of 1890 that they were actually voted upon and adopted as official doctrine of the church. Page 114 at 7%. Monday, October 6, 1890, Bishop Orson F. Whitney first read the Articles of Faith, which included a declaration of the church members that they believed in obeying, honoring, and sustaining the law. While the article had been part of a Mormon theological literature for half a century, it seemed a convenient time to sustain them as the official rule of conduct for the church. This was done on a motion by Apostle Franklin D. Richards, and you can read about that in the Solemn Covenant by B. Carmen Hardy, page 135. So, they didn't adopt that until, the church was being persecuted by the government. That's interesting. Anyway, ironically, the same conference, plural marriage, was voted out, while just 38 years before, in 1852, it had been voted and sustained as a true doctrine of the church. Hence, both good and bad men, true and false doctrines can be accepted or rejected by the vote of the church members. But I thought that the church leaders would never lead the church astray. That's interesting. When President Nelson says that, the children of LGBT people can't be baptized, or go on missions or whatever. I don't know. Hold on. Emmett, what are you doing?
Turning the lights on.
Why? I'm sitting here doing this.
Okay, I didn't know
You didn't know that you couldn't hear me talking?
Yeah, but I didn't know you were using that.
Seriously, Emmett?
Uh-huh.
Go to night.
Okay.
It's 10:35. The now 19-year-old bum that lives in my basement. Say hi, bum.
Hello.
You have to say hi louder. They can't hear you. Now he's coughing.
Cough.
Anyway, he turned off the lights on me. It's 10:36 p.m. here, so. All right, all things in the church must be done by common consent. This makes the people, men and women under God, the rulers of the church. The responsibility and work of the church are not only for but by the people as a whole. And that comes from Priesthood and Church Government by John A. Witso, page 234. Elder Bruce R. McConkie explained the consequences of common consent. Quote, there is, of course, the democratic principles of common consent, whereunder the people may accept or reject what the Lord offers to them. Acceptance brings salvation. Rejection leads to damnation. Doctrinal, I love making the voices. Doctrinal New Testament Commentary by McConkie, Volume 1, page 538. B.H. Roberts concurred and further explained, suppose a law is promulgated before the Latter-day Saints, a revealed principle of truth is submitted for their acceptance, and then in the exercise of that liberty which God has conferred upon his church, they reject it. The question is then asked, what remains? Okay, we're on page 115 at 8%. Wow. Why the truth remains. The action of the church has not affected that in the least. It is just as true if the church had accepted it. Our acceptance or rejection does not make or mar the truth. It simply determines our own relationship to that truth. If we reject the truth still remains. That's why you're not supposed to just present something in conference and then get a sustaining vote on it right away. You're supposed to actually let the people ponder over things and then go back and by common consent either accept it or reject it. But that's not how it works in today's church, but that's how it's supposed to work. Anyway, human conduct does not affect the truth. And quote, The Defense of the Faith and the Saints by Roberts, Volume 2, page 518. And also from Elder Roberts, quote, and if they reject it, the truth still remains, and it is my opinion that they would not make further progress until they accepted the rejected truth. And that comes from the Improvement Era, Church Publication, Volume 8, page 363. In the common consent process, however, if someone casts a negative vote against any of the church general authorities or their programs, it could lead to serious questioning, threats, and being escorted from the tabernacle or being required to sign a test oath. Joseph Musser wrote of such repercussions, quote, why vote at all? Why vote at the conference if one is compelled to vote in the affirmatively? If all things are to be done by common consent, how then can a few be singled out and forced to sign a statement of acceptance without qualification or explanation? The present attitude of the leaders is that of modern gangsters. You may use your inalienable right to vote as you see fit, but you must vote for me. Truth Magazine, Volume 1, page 135. Unfortunately, those who have voted for eternal and unchangeable principles, ordinances, and laws of the priesthood, and would not compromise, have been excommunicated from the LDS Church. Church members find themselves in a precarious position. Do they sustain the gospel of the priesthood or the gospel of the church? One cannot help but wonder what would have happened if, by common consent, church members had voted not to make changes in doctrine and ordinances. So we're on page 116 at 10%. In our 11th article of faith, we claim the privilege of worshiping God according to the dictates of our own conscience and allow all men to do the same privilege, except if you are a Mormon and voice a negative vote. Church members can vote by common consent for changes in ordinances and doctrines and policies, and the majority vote will stand. However, man holding the holy priesthood has no voting privileges for or against priesthood laws, and ordinances that are eternal and authored by the Lord himself. He must conform to these priesthood laws or else prove unworthy of the priesthood and risk the loss of it. Therein lies a significant difference between common consent in the church and predetermined eternal priesthood laws. Number 3, missionary work. When Jesus began his ministry, he called others to go with him as missionaries. He told them, "Provide neither gold nor silver nor brass in your purses, nor script for your journey." And script, that's cash money, I believe. Matthew chapter 10, verses 9 through 10. Luke recorded, "And he said unto them, Take nothing for your journey, neither staves nor script," cash money, I think. That might be... Well, let me just see right here. Define script. Script, a provisional certificate of money subscribed to a bank or company, a certificate entitling the holder to acquire possessions of certain whatever, a provisional certificate of money subscribed to a bank. Okay, that's what a script is. That's from the Oxford Dictionary of English and the New Oxford American Dictionary. Yep, so that's what that is. Take nothing for your journey, neither staves nor script. I think I know what a stave is, but I'm just interested to see what the dictionary says. A vertical wooden post or plank in a building or other structure. A set of 5 parallel lines on any... Well, that's not it. It's basically just a wooden staff. But I can't take my staff with me? But I love my staff. Neither bread nor money. Oh, yeah. Well, why would he say money in script? Maybe there's a translational error there. Anyway, Luke chapter 9, verse 3. These were Christ's instruction to his 12 apostles, Luke 9:1, as well as to the 70, which is in Luke 10:1, who were to be the missionary force of the church. And that's the way it's supposed to be now, but they've changed everything because change is fun. They do things because they want to do things, not because God tells them to do things. Anyway, these missionaries were sent out 2 by 2 before his face into every city and place, whether he himself would come. Luke chapter 10, verse 1. That's talking about the 70s. So how this is supposed to work with missionary work, it's not about elders that are 18 to 25 or sisters going out into doing... That's not how it's supposed to be done. I know that's how it's done now, but that's not how God gave the instructions for it to be done. And guess what? He didn't change or abrogate any of those things that he said. What is supposed to happen is fully grown men who are called to the office of the 70, who are not high apostles or high priesthood holders. They are elders in the 70. That's how it's supposed to be. Don't get mad at me. You can actually go back and read or listen to the episodes I've done on the 70, and I laid out perfectly. If you can't figure it out after you've looked at the transcription of those things that I did, my podcasts and all of that, then I don't know what to tell you. But the 70s are supposed to be fully grown men who are well versed, who are set apart to be traveling 70 apostles. Yes, they're apostles, to go out and do the work of the ministry, and they are supposed to go before the 12 traveling apostles, who are not supposed to be high priests, who are not supposed to have a home where the church headquarters is, and they're supposed to go out and do the things. They're not supposed to be Babylonian businessmen sitting on councils and boards making money hand over fist for being part of Babylonian type organizations. Like, if you're a high priest, like the first presidency, they're called to be high priests. The apostles are supposed to be elders. They're supposed to travel. Same with the with the 70s. The presidency of the 70s are high priests. They stay where they're at. They direct the work from headquarters, basically. But the 70s under them in the different quorums all the way down, they're supposed to be elders who are traveling apostles. They're 70 apostles. They go out and they prepare the way for the Council of the 12 to go and teach the people. But apparently that's not acceptable to the Gentile church, so they change a thing and they do what they want. In our dispensation, as the first LDS elders began returning home from their missions in the April of 1832, the prophet Joseph Smith received a revelation, Doctrine and Covenants, section 84, and we're on page 117 at 11%, that seemingly consisted of two parts, the first of the Holy Priesthood and the second on missionary work. However, the introductory paragraph for that section states the prophet designated it a revelation on the priesthood, which essentially means that both parts pertain to the priesthood. From verses 6 to 42, it discusses the holy priesthood, and from verses 61 to the end, which is verse 120, it specifically discusses missionary work. In this revelation, the Lord reinstituted the program of traveling without purse or script, as did the ancient apostles. Therefore, let no man among you, for this commandment is unto all the faithful who are called of God in the church unto the ministry. From this hour take purse or script that goeth forth to proclaim this gospel of the kingdom. Doctrine and Covenants, section 84, verse 86. Thus, from 1832 until after the turn of the century, this priesthood law and procedure was also the established rule of the LDS Church. That's because God told them to do it, and they did it, right? At least they did some things right. Why missionary work was without purse or script, why was missionary work without purse or script the accepted way of the Lord? The Apostle George Q. Cannon beautifully answered this question, quote, every young man who goes out, as in the case of our young men who constantly going goes without purse or script, what is the result? They have to feel after God. If they want a pair of pantaloons, which is just pants, they have to go ask God to obtain them. If they want a meal of victuals, they have to exercise faith on this account. In sending out my sons to preach the gospel or having them go, I would not give them $1 to go with. And while I am on the subject, I will say the father who gives his sons money to go and preach the gospel does them a great injury. Does them the greatest injury he can do. I would not do it if I had millions at my disposal. I would not give them $1. Let them go out and fill after God and obtain a knowledge of God through faith and through mighty prayer. When a man is hungry, when a man is without friends, when a man has no place to sleep, he will, if he believes in God and his gifts, be certain to go to ask and to him and ask him to furnish that which he needs. And when his prayers are answered, he has greater faith the next time. George Q. Cannon, Journal of Discourses, volume 24, page 345 and 346. So all like George Q. Cannon here, he, let's see here. So already by the time of George Q. Cannon, they were sending out young men instead of what God told him to do with the 70 apostles. Oh, brother. I can say one thing about this, though. I mean, I've been homeless a number of times. Like, I've been homeless where I walk the streets in the middle of winter finding no shelter and almost dying from hypothermia. That was back in 1996, 1997. After my conversion, my roommates kicked me out because they did not like the LDS church, and the LDS church did nothing to help me at all, even though for my acceptance of Joseph Smith, I lost my place to sleep in December of 1996 in Davis County, Utah. I was homeless all the way through December into January. I had no place to sleep. I did have some money because I would donate plasma. But I had no vehicle to live in. I had no car to sleep in. I had nothing. It was like some of the most horrible experiences of my life. But there's been other times when I was homeless by choice. So after I was engaged to this girl up in Washington State, and I moved everything up there. I had a motorhome. I moved everything up there, and I was going to get a job there, and like we're going to get married, and we were going to live in Moses Lake. Her parents decided that I was not good enough for their daughter. Surprise, surprise. And even though at this time I was like, I was a truck driver. Like I had like a lot of experience, and I could have gotten a job up there. Whatever. I was on unemployment because the oil field went bust when I moved up there, which is the only reason I didn't have a job at that time. And things fell apart and broke my heart, like, completely. Yeah, it broke my heart completely. Anyway, after some severe suicidal ideations, I packed up my stuff and put it in storage, and I drove my car to Florida because I needed to go to the beach. I was like, I just need to get away from all this. The happiest place that I ever, even though it was during a time of a lot of abuse, for me, I was 10 years old. I lived in Okinawa, Japan. I loved it there. Lots of memories. Anyway, I was like, well, after I tried to overdose and hang myself 3 different times, I decided, okay, well, I can't die. Like, I overdosed on 5,000 milligrams of tramadol. Like, I hung myself 3 different times. Like, I was seriously, like, I'm done with this world. But I couldn't die. Okay, so I was like, well, where am I going to go? So I packed up my stuff, and I got in my car, and I drove to St. Petersburg, Florida. I was going to Dade County, but I didn't make it there. I made it to Tampa, and I was like, Tampa's a dump. So I went over to St. Petersburg, and I fell in love with that place. Yeah, and for 3 weeks, I lived in my car. I went to labor place every day. It's called Labor Finders. Got in line at like 5 in the morning so that I could be sent out on jobs and make some money and maybe save up enough money to get into a roommate situation to where I wasn't living in my car. And I slept in my car and I showered at the beach. Like every day after work, I'd go run into the water and just relax. And then I would go up on the beach and they had these showers and I would wash off and get all clean. And then I'd go get in my car. And sometimes I had money and sometimes I didn't. And sometimes I had absolutely no money and no food. And there were times when people, and I would never beg. I never asked anybody for anything. If I couldn't get it myself by working, then I would go hungry, and I'd go hungry for days. Like I went, what's interesting, after 3 days of being hungry, your hunger pains go away. At least they do for me. And like, there's been twice in my life when I've gone without food, like any solid food, any broth, anything. The only thing I had was water. For 30 days at a time. And then I was like, okay, I probably should start eating food again because, like, yeah, I need to. So after 30 days, I would start drinking broth and work my way up to, like, creamy soups. And like, not a lot, because by the time you've been starving yourself for 30 days, you can eat like a quarter of a peanut butter sandwich and you are stuffed full. But you can't do that at first, because if you eat solid foods when you haven't been eating solid foods, your body rejects it. You have to work up to it. So anyway, but like, I have been homeless, like I'm telling you, and like, God always provided for me. There were times when I was at a workplace one time to like looking for jobs, like trying to figure out what I'm going to do here. And I remember this guy, I was so hungry, but I was clean. I didn't look homeless. I was just looking for a job and using the computers at a place called like a workforce services place where you go get on the computer and you look for jobs or whatever. And a guy came over and gave me money. He's like, God told me that you needed this and that I was supposed to give it to you. I didn't ask for it, but Heavenly Father saw my issues and he provided for me. And eventually I was able to get work through one of the there was two main companies that used me. Of course, I did lots of other work. I did, like, we'd clean out 55 and older trailer homes and stuff. And because I was one of the hardest workers, I was hired on there to help be the assistant manager of the maintenance department. So I did a ton of work. It was fun. Like, they just let me do my thing. They told me what I needed to do, and then I would just go and do it. And because I worked at that place, people die. They come down from West Coast Florida. People come down from like Wisconsin and Minnesota and Illinois, Michigan. And they come down to West Coast Florida, and then people die in Florida, and then their families don't want to come get all their stuff, so they just abandon it, and then you have to evict dead people out of their homes, and then you have to get rid of all their stuff, and like, nobody wants their stuff because all the thrift stores are completely packed full, and so most of it goes to the dump. But people like me, that is the assistant manager, they can do what he wants with the stuff that is, that has been abandoned. Like, I had antique furniture, and like, I got into this roommate situation where there was 6 people in a 3-bedroom place because they were all bums, and one by one they all left, and I was left living in this 3-bedroom place for $600 a month that was a mile from the beach and a mile from downtown and had no furniture in it. Like, because these other people took their junk with them, that trash junk. Like, the place was built in 1919. It's, nice old place, but it was nice. I liked living there. Anyway, but because I was the assistant manager at this place, I was able to have nice furniture. Like really nice furniture. Like antique furniture. And just everything was nice. But God provided for me. Like he put me in the situations he needed me to be in. Oh, wow. I just realized we're at an hour already and I'm only at 13%. Let me get to 15% and then we'll end the program for today. And I guess I'll just do 15, 30, 45, whatever it is. What is 15% divided by 100? What is that? I have no idea. There's going to be a lot of episodes of this program, apparently, for this chapter. Anyway, gradually, however, parents began sending a little money to their sons in the mission field. Then came programs for elders' quorums to set up missionaries' funds to assist the missionaries. Eventually, rules were instigated that new missionaries had to have a certain amount of money to enter the mission field and also have proof that he could be sustained by a specific amount of money while he was a missionary. What a complete change in the financial arrangement for missionaries. And you know what? Like, I understand that the way I went as a missionary wasn't the way God does. Like, I didn't know at the time. No, I think it was like $300 a month that my grandparents had sent in every month for me to stay in the mission field. And I think it's $300 a month across the board. I could be wrong in different countries, but anyway, so we had an apartment. We lived in an apartment. Like, we had bicycles. They sent me money so I could like fix my bike. And I had a bike called the Leahona. It was like the best bike ever. It was like a road bike, but it was built like a mountain bike. Like, it was awesome. And it was called the Leahona. I actually got one of those Crown air fresheners, and I figured out a way to put it on the top, and they'd be like, "What is that?" And I'm like, "It's my Leahona." Ha, 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 ha. And then I'd tell people what a Leahona was, and in the Book of Mormon, like, it was just something to talk about. And I had a great time on my mission, and I learned a lot, and, I was also very sick during my mission, so, but I should never have gone out at all if people were following the rules and the instructions that God had given. There would be 70 apostles who were not boys sent out to do things a certain way without purser script. But nevertheless, I did learn a ton on my mission. Okay, traveling without purser script became a lost part of the past. To recap its history and significance, number one, it was practiced at the time of Christ and was restored in our dispensation in the very same manner and with the same word expressions. Number two, it was included in the Doctrine and Covenants with other items that pertained to priesthood work. It was given to the LDS Church as a priesthood law. Number three, the Lord has said it was to be instituted from this hour forth without any indication that it should be changed or discontinued. He never gave a revelation changing or stopping its practice or abrogating it. Number four, it was not given by way of preparatory instruction and experimental effort or because they were too poor to go any other way. The Lord said it was a commandment, a perpetual, unchangeable law of the priesthood. Nevertheless, this commandment and priesthood law has been changed by the church to be more accommodating and fit their modern program instead of church conforming to this unchangeable law of the priesthood. All right, so now we're on page 119, and the next topic is going to be the garment of the priesthood, and I'll come back with that when I start the next part of my program. And yeah, a little over an hour, but it's okay. So thank you for listening, everyone. Take care. God bless. And God be with you till we meet again.
In the dynamic world of programmatic ad buying, Viant is your ultimate CTV partner. Target with precision. Buy with confidence. Viant empowers you with AI-driven technology that reaches your audience where they engage most, ensuring your message hits home. And the campaign results? Transparent, thanks to Viant's advanced measurement suite. For media buyers who demand the best, Viant delivers. Viant, elevate your CTV campaign performance.
With the Lucky Land Slots, you can get lucky just about anywhere.
This is your captain speaking. We've got clear runway and the weather's fine, but we're just going to circle up here a while and get lucky. No, nothing like that. It's just these cash prizes add up quick. So I suggest you sit back, keep your tray table upright, and start getting lucky.
Play for free at LuckyLandSlots.com. Are you feeling lucky? No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply.